Kolbecast, episode 294. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by Kolbe's Megan Lengyel and Leslie Spencer to discuss physics. Physics can be a course that many find intimidating in the high school years, yet it provides an amazing look into the modern natural sciences while exploring the theories behind everything from motion to electricity and light. In today's podcast, we discuss the place of physics in a classical curriculum, the challenges to including physics in a homeschooling program, and the benefits of undertaking the challenge. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. I was a little worried as we were going in because, of course, as we're getting ready to do a podcast, that's when I have to have repairmen coming through to fix a heater in this cold weather. And so the dogs are likely to start barking. But I think everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. So
we're keeping it real. That's very much, a lot of folks can relate. And again, it's funny. It's like the signal goes out. These types of things. Oh, we're doing a recording. So everything else is happening. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. That's all right, though. Okay. Today, we're discussing why physics is beneficial in a classical education and how studying the natural world cultivates logic, order, and wonder. In other words, why classical education needs science and vice versa. We have with us Megan Lengyel, Kolbe's Chief Academic Officer, whose background includes a master's degree in meteorology. And joining us also is Leslie Spencer, whom we introduced to Kolbecast listeners in episode 237. Mrs. Spencer has taught physics to Kolbe students for many years, among other scientific areas of study, and is a veteran homeschooling mom, too. Hello, you two. Welcome back.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Hi.
Good to see you.
It's great to have you guys back. We've been looking forward to this conversation. We're also going to get a side of Stephen that we catch glimpses of from time to time on the Kolbecast, that of instructor, as he is also part of the physics instructional team here at Kolbe. He's going to tell us about that. This episode is part of our collaboration with the curriculum department, so many thanks to Erica Treat and Maggie Hayden for their help making this happen. So let's start with talking about what brings us all together today. Megan, some of our listeners might be unfamiliar with your science background, so let's start there. Tell us about that.
Sure. So my undergrad actually is from the University of Dallas, and I received a BS in physics. I started out as a math major there, and it got very theoretical very quickly. And I remembered that I just really liked to what people would call plug and chug. So I like to just solve equations. I found a lot of joy in that. And so then I found myself as a physics major and went on to the University of Oklahoma after a little 1-year gap to get a master's in meteorology. So some people may know I met my husband storm chasing. So my meteorology degree was quite useful in that regard. But other than that, I have not actually used my meteorology degree. I started working for Kolbe about 4 or 5 months after my husband and I got married. We had just graduated from graduate school, and we found ourselves out in California. My husband found a job out there, and I happened to meet Mary Rowles and her brother, Brian Muth. And it was kind of the Catholic community that we were a part of when we moved out there, and they offered me a job in the homeschool. So I really wasn't planning on staying there. I just really needed to make some money because we were starting out. And lo and behold, God had other plans that he didn't tell me about. But Nancy Nelson, who was our bookstore manager, she maybe about 6 weeks after I had been there, just kind of answering phones and doing some admin work, she came out of the bookstore kind of in an August tizzy, and realized that our physics textbook had basically gone out of print. I'm not out of print, but we had gotten a new edition. So they had upgraded from the 8th to the 9th edition. And in that change, the chapters had been like reordered. So you could no longer use the homeschool course plan that had been created for the 8th edition. You could not use that with the 9th edition. Now, at that point in time, the way Kolbe Academy homeschool worked is that the day school teachers would write the course plans and curriculum over the summer for the homeschool families. But being that it was August, they were starting school. So writing curriculum in August when you're also starting school at the day school was not really in the cards for the physics teacher over there. So I kind of raised my hand and said, well, I was a physics major, I could probably figure that out. And that is literally how my long-term job at Kolbe Academy began. So the first course plan that I ever wrote was for the conceptual physics textbook, edition 9 by Paul Hewitt. And I spent the first, 2 or 3 months working at Kolbe, digging into that and figuring out how to write a curriculum for homeschool families to use to get through a physics text. So, and then I went on from there to really revamp all of Kolbe's math and science program from K through 12. That's what I did kind of from the first 8-9 years that I worked at Kolbe before helping to start the online school in 2013. So that's kind of my background and where, I don't know how I was involved in the science. It really was there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the math and science curriculum before there were blood, sweat, and tears in the online courses. So
you have given a lot of that for Kolbe, and we are grateful for that. Mrs. Spencer, you've been with Kolbe for a long time. Your family.
I have.
You told some of that when we met you in episode 237, but remind us of that, please, and kind of along the same lines as Mrs. Lengyel. Tell us about your background,
Sure.
and so forth.
I too am a University of Dallas graduate and very happy for that. I was truly inspired by taking classes from Dr. Olenek. And I'm thrilled to report that my own daughters who went to UD also had the same Dr. Olenek. He understand that he has tried to resign and retire in his old age, and nonetheless has been told that he actually can't until they find somebody to replace him. So he is irreplaceable with his enthusiasm and his love of physics and astronomy. That was really something. We had a similar situation to what Megan just described. I don't remember the exact year. We lost our science teacher just before school was going to start. And at that time, I had been working, I had very young children, all babies at that point. And I had been working in the office at Kolbe, and I did a lot to persuade people that we needed good, inspiring textbooks. Again, this is, Dr. Olenek was my role model in this. Not necessarily something that we can make it Catholic. It doesn't have to start out Catholic. We can add that. That's our value added that we add to the course plan, that we help people to engage with modern science. So, I had worked on that with the conceptual physics that Dr. Olenek used for the general physics classes at UD. And I whipped up a course plan. And I laugh at what Megan says about how the day school teachers were getting ready to start school and didn't have time to write course plans. Because back in my day, when we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to Kolbe Academy, we were regularly up till 2. But it was such an exciting time. The internet was new. We were building a website when most people weren't even aware of what websites were. Adding all these components to it and really trying to get this moving and off the ground. Just great creative work. Something, very satisfying. And so that was how I started. That was it. That it was just, I didn't expect it. I guess it's the same thing. God had other plans. It worked perfectly well for a mom with young kids to be able to do that. So I took up the open teaching position and worked out the course plans. I may have already worked them out beforehand. I don't recall that exact chronology. But it was just great. And of course, we had a lot of help from Dr. Charles Worth. I think we use his astronomy book. I don't know what else we use from him.
Yes, astronomy and chemistry.
Who was a great friend. Yeah, he was a great friend of Kolbe Academy, and he was always there to provide science equipment, advice, and so on. So that's how I became involved. And quickly found that we had a very we had to answer a lot of questions from our homeschooling community about how we did these things and why. And I think that was one of the best things that could have happened to us, because it forced us to actually stop and think, how does this fit with our Ignatian education paradigm? And what are we really hoping to give to the students? And I think of all the things that you mentioned, it's the wonder that came through in Dr. Olenek's personality. And that if they learn nothing else, if they remember nothing else, they should be just sort of astonished at how all this works. So that's what I hope our students get from this.
I love hearing this history and seeing this long thread throughout the years and how much has been put into this. So, okay, Stephen, tell us about your story on the same lines.
Yeah. My education is weird, kind of, or eclectic, maybe. I don't know what the right word, but I've talked about Thomas Aquinas College a lot. So that was my first. I took a high school physics course that I didn't get much out of, but at Thomas Aquinas College, you go through. I mean, it's actually this huge math part of this liberal arts degree. You think liberal arts degree, and it's like, don't touch the math and science, but there, after doing Euclid as the foundation for geometry, then we would start in Ptolemy, go through Ptolemy, then Apollonius as far as conic sections, then read through a little bit of Copernicus, not a ton, Kepler, and then junior year going through Galileo and Newton, actually, with his science. And then senior year, it was a little bit of Maxwell for me, but then, a ton of Einstein. And just the interesting thing about that is that, the approach of a place like Thomas Aquinas College is to look at the ideas kind of as they stand on themselves. So it's kind of finding the flaws in Ptolemy, seeing where it needs to be done. But this is all, all while we're going through Aristotle and natural philosophy, in addition to looking at the development of this natural science that's kind of coming about. And so you're looking at Aristotle talking about, motion, and everything that's moved has to have a mover, and remembering this dramatic like blow up junior year when you get to Galileo and Newton, who basically kind of, that's where a real split between natural science and natural philosophy occur. And like these fights in class about, wait, this can't be right because every move has to have a mover, and going through. So we're trying to kind of wrestle with these different ideas, but also while trying to figure out how calculus works and read Newton and do his demonstrations, which was just about debilitating as far as breaking things. So I never thought I would continue with physics after that. But then reading Einstein was just like, oh, this changes everything now. It's a complete, like, everything I thought was broken with Newton, even though I understood Newton is explaining things so beautifully and everything is so wonderful. But you get to Einstein and you just think, wait, I think this works with Aristotle. I could actually put these ideas back together now and start to try to figure this out, which people have just started to do, as far as I can tell, over the last 20 years or so. I'm sure other people were working on it before then, but how does natural philosophy work with natural science? So that was my introduction. I guess I must have liked it enough because I went on to get a civil engineering degree, which is where I got exposed to the more typical, textbook sort of physics, and then just doing all sorts of statics and dynamics and analysis of loads and forces. And so spent way more time doing that than I would have planned either. But then ended up being an engineer for only like 5 years, professional engineer, civil engineer, but then got into education. So then it was starting to figure out, how do I teach physics? And again, with homeschoolers online, huge challenge, and try to be true to both giving them really good content so they understand the way that the modern physics, what the current theories are, how to use these, what to do, but being true to my Aristotelian Thomistic background. So yeah, I taught physics for a number of years online, and Now I'm fortunate and slow, but fortunate to be kind of working through some of the digital homeschool presentations and things. So hopefully that background will benefit the lectures that I'm working on for some of those asynchronous and digital homeschool courses.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Neat. Would you take us through the historical foundations of science in the classical tradition?
Physics really it has its birth in astronomy, right? So we love astronomy here too at Kolbe Academy, because you both have that wonder sort of thing, but it's really when you're starting to build models. Like Ptolemy's system has consistent principles. He was trying to not only describe with careful observations what was being seen in the heavens, but also build a model that you could predict future, like an eclipse. He could predict that. And as he's continuing to try to describe everything, you start to see problems. Like he's trying to explain the motion of Mars and he just can't get it right. Whatever he tweaks with his model, it's like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And of course, he's consistent with the principles at the time that all heavy things are at the center of the universe and the lighter things are out. So natural motion is everything falls down towards the center of the universe. And then he's dealing with these eternal bodies of the heavens. So whether it's the fixed stars moving in perfect circles or these wandering planets that are kind of confusing to try to describe. And so it is really just observing the world, making models, testing the theory. So this is coming out of ancient Greece that we're doing this. But as you keep going through whether it's Copernicus who kind of says, well, what if we switch it and the sun is at the center of our universe, or at least our solar system, as we'd call it now. And then Kepler, was using Tycho Brahe, which I love his name. He sounds like he should be a drummer in a rock band. And he's interesting because he also had a silver nose because he lost his nose in a duel. But he had great observations, which allowed Kepler to develop this epicycle model, which then, I don't know if Newton knew too much about it, but Newton certainly will utilize that. But so this is all coming out of this, but I think we're talking about that. I've already mentioned that sort of break when we get to Galileo, and we know there was conflict between the church and Galileo for many, many reasons. But one of the things is kind of turning the whole system on his head, which a lot of scientists at the time, Catholic scientists, didn't have a problem with. They just wanted to try to figure it out because it's like, wait, there's a moon around Jupiter with a telescope that he can make observations and there's spots on the moon. There's these craters and things. What's going on? So now you have to wrestle with how are heavy things, rocks, giant things flying around the earth? How is that happening with principles? Anyway, so like I said, I could go on forever about this, but it's out of kind of the classical traditions, and you really at this point, I think, get what we will now call natural science. So I think before then, natural philosophy and natural science, so Aristotle and such, compared to Newton and Galileo, have kind of split at this point. And we're not quite sure how to bring everything together, but physics is the foundational subject to see that this is what happened. And you can follow the steps historically and just see the whole scientific process at work, which is really valuable to go through, right? This is, immensely impactful. So you're fundamentally looking at important things that do inspire wonder. You're looking at this magnificent predictive model that's moved all the way through, from Ptolemy through Einstein, through quantum mechanical models and all of those things. And the predictive and productive power of these are incredible. So I think, to kind of bring it back to education, though, that's the real challenge to see, how do you take these things, which you can't go through all of this in high school. You're not both ready for it, and it's overwhelming. So how do you present these great discoveries in a way that's approachable to a high school student who may be just starting to dabble in calculus as well, because the physics, as we're, even if you're getting to Newtonian physics, I mean, he created calculus, one of the forms of calculus at least. So you've got to have calculus, and then you've got to have these other. I mean, when you get to Einstein and the Maxwell and the quantum mechanical models, that's beyond whatever that stretches almost every college student, in addition to just impossible for almost every high school student. So I think that's the challenge of education, is bringing that all together, and how do you present it in a way that it still gives that wonder, gives them the picture, but doesn't leave them feeling like they've got it all figured out. Because sometimes you can oversimplify things a bit in high school, and you think, oh, I understand everything. It's like, nope, just a little bit. But anyway.
We got a lot of pushback from people who were, I think, coming, just because of where we were, coming out of Thomas Aquinas College, because that's sort of close to Kolbe, and kind of felt we should be presenting things historically. Right? They should be reading the great books, which means they should be reading Aristotle, Newton, and Copernicus, and so on, which is a nice idea, but it is a bit much to ask for high schoolers. And they have already been exposed to a lot of, I mean, everybody gets exposed to science. So for us, the question was, well, what are we going to do to kind of put it in context so that they understand? It's a developing understanding, right? Just as you see yourself developing through time. Our understanding of how the world works develops through time, and we can hat tip and explain these things, and hopefully, or I would say, or just to be hoped, that we would inspire them to go deeper into it. A lot of our students have already internalized, for example, in the Galileo controversy. Well, Galileo was right, but he was a jerk, and that's why he had all those troubles. And it's actually a bit more complicated than that. And as you get older and you see, well, actually, he had a pope who supported him very strongly, who died, and a new pope came in with new priorities. And it's not necessarily true that that either side of priorities was wrong. I mean, you can be factually wrong, but you can be also wrong about how you implement, teach, what you tell, how you work with this. So our students tend to be a little defensive, and I think a lot of our church has been defensive in the war between science and faith. And one of the things that we hope to do is to bring that together. Again, it comes from, there are all these wonderful people like St. Francis and, the Franciscans and the Dominicans, but the Ignatian education model is amazing for its ability to engage with society and what you need to get ahead in society now at this time, not necessarily just learning the things that, what Aristotle said or whatever. That's all an important part of it. But even at the time where Ignatius was adapting the University of Paris model, his goal was bigger. His goal is, we're going to develop faithful Christians and who are bringing Christ to the world, in the world. So that is a lot of what we had to address. Should we, why we don't take them through all of the steps that Stephen just described. And all we can do, I think, at the high school level is just say, in the future, someday, you can spend an entire semester taking a class about the trial of Galileo or the history of science, or you can take an entire theology course about the relationship of science and the Catholic Church, especially in the modern era, because this is way too much to expect of a high school physics course. But we give them the framework, a little of the background, and that Hewitt book that Megan was talking about is really good with introducing scientists. And our current textbook, I think, is even more sympathetic to is less inclined, I should say, not sympathetic, less inclined to attack Aristotle which is a very common tactic, right? He was wrong, and people wanted to believe in him, so they denied the evidence in front of their eyes, and eventually we, had to come to terms with the fact that he could be wrong, which is fine. All of us can be. So, I love, any textbook that would be appropriate to Kolbe, though, has to include some of that background, and we can hope that some students will take it really, really deep, and that everybody will understand a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit less of the philosophizer in this group. I'm more just, logistics, right? Like, why do we even offer a physics course at Kolbe? There's the philosophical reasons. The faith and science, bringing those together, are just key to who Kolbe is. How we put together our curriculum is basically showing God through all of the different academics, in particular science. And I think that's one of we often get asked, why do you use secular textbooks? And I mean, I remember when I first started working at Kolbe, I don't know if it was probably Brian Muth that would say it. He'd say, well, what is truth is Catholic. And, there's no such thing as Catholic science. I mean, science is the study of how the world works, not why the world is here. And that was part of my own formation coming out of UD, and then getting emphasized here again, just working at Kolbe. But just if you look at how our original diplomas were designed back in the early 2000s, and now we only have one diploma, but we have instead awards that are kind of designed around how our old diplomas used to outline course requirements. Physics was always part of that. Our summa cum laude diploma, which probably when Leslie was here was called the classics diploma, you were required to take physics. And now our St. Maximilian Kolbe Award, which is our highest academic award for students, also requires physics as one of those courses. And we had some debate about that. Stephen, I remember, a conversation that you had, myself, several other members of the executive team, was whether to require physics for that award or not, because it is a difficult topic, subject to attempt as a high schooler. The physics that we offer is a algebra trig based physics, but having calculus actually makes physics a little bit easier to learn. So there's a little bit of that push and pull that we had to consider. But in the end, what we really wanted to do was make sure that students got exposed to that topic before they left for college. A lot of students will go on and not take physics at all in college. And so having that full approach to a liberal arts education, having physics integrated into the curriculum at some point was really important to us. And that's kind of how we landed on it. So my philosophy, like if I'm talking to a parent who is debating on whether or not to take physics, it's not required to graduate from Kolbe. You do not have to take physics to get a Kolbe Academy diploma. There are different awards you have to, in which you have to take it for. But if a parent were to ask me whether to take it or not, I would really encourage them to, especially if they have a student who is not math or science inclined, because they probably will not see that topic again in college. And I just think physics puts order in the world. You can see God's, to use Stacy Trasankos's words, God's handiwork in those equations. And I think it's a really important thing for families to consider to round out their students' education. I have kids that tend to be a little more STEM focused, and they are always begging me not to take, Mom, do I really need to take the medieval history this year? And really, diploma wise, they do not have to. Like, they could skip this year and just take, modern history and be done. But it's so important for them, because I know some of them may not see that topic again if they go on and they do mechanical engineering or whatever. They may not have that opportunity. So I see high school as a place to explore all the different subject areas, And you definitely see that at Kolbe with the way that we've designed our awards is encouraging that behavior, I guess, in our students.
It's a real challenge. And I mean, I think Colby's done an amazing job at that because, I mean, even you think of the difficulty of both from like a parent who's trying to teach at home. If you, well, okay, there's multiple things. Colby's got all sorts of different services to help make sure that this can be done. But even if you just look at trying to do a physics course or the challenges that that presents to a homeschooling family, even above these really super hard, like medieval history courses. I mean, because you do need a really good textbook, which Kolbe has chosen, but textbooks change every couple of years, which means for a homeschooling family, if they get the new book, you got to rewrite, like you said, rewrite all of the lesson plans, and then how is if the parent isn't super confident in their math ability and physics ability, how are you going to give them the resources so that they can, work their way through with the student and things like that. So, so it presents extra challenges, I think, but I agree that it's worth the effort, definitely. But it's hard. It's hard to put all of that together.
It is, but and again, everybody's coming at it from a different. This is my strength. This is my weakness. It's nice. When I was at UD, there was a huge debate over whether the United States would fund the Super Collider, which eventually wound up being in Switzerland. We are only partially it was funded by the European Union instead of the United States, which is fine with me, but that's a taxpayer kind of question. But to have students who have no idea about modern physics at all, or why that would even be valuable, that's a loss for them, and as a Catholic school, St. Augustine, long pedigree in the church, would say, well, the book of nature is like the Bible. It's God writing for us to read in the same way. You should be amazed. And if you discover to your surprise that it is true that rate times time is always distance, but unfortunately, when it comes to something like light, rate is unchangeable. So you're going to have to change things like time and distance. As mind-blowing as that is, a high schooler can get that. You don't actually have to have them go through everything Einstein wrote to get the bigger picture there. And it should be a little bit exciting. I mean, medieval history should be a little bit exciting. It's all kind of exciting. And I know students so often, especially this time of year, it's exams, they are ground down. They are not excited. They are just trying to get through what they're being asked to get through. But I think that, we can present it in the online school and in the curriculum itself. There is, I think, a lot of attention paid to this is the big picture. Don't ever take your eyes off the ultimate prize here.
That with what Megan was saying as well about the clarity, with what you were saying about the clarity of physics of the order, because some of the other big topics that you would cover, like evolution and things, which are certainly worth discussing, and they should be, but they're even harder to kind of see. I mean, because the studies that you have to go are even harder to understand for a high school student. It's more telling them this would be reasonable for discoveries made by all of these people, or this, here's the problems that we have to, but physics, you can really see just from the beginning, like, oh, this makes sense. It has this predictive power. It's clear in its theories. And yes, it gets complicated. It gets really complicated, but you can see also how those complications can come about. There's actually, Albert Einstein wrote a book called The Evolution of Physics with Leopold Infeld. He wrote it for common people. So there's no math in it, but he goes through from the ancients to relativity and quantum mechanics and just explains what was discovered, what had to change in the theories. And when I was working with students, I'd always make them read that book just because you don't even have to look at the math. You can look at the math, do all of that over here, but then you can look at this and see, here's Einstein explaining in basic words how we got to where we are today in theories, or granted, 100 years ago in theories.
Yeah. I mean, our big discoveries, even in very recent times. Since I've been teaching, like the Higgs boson, things like that. So physics keeps going, but we should just all be very grateful to Aristotle for writing a book called Physics. So it's sort of, that's what makes it so core to so much classical education. We could say, well, take it up with Aristotle, friends, take it up with Aquinas.
So keep bearing all this in mind. It's wonderful I'm a big fan of the long view. That helps so much to keep everything in perspective, bringing it to the day to day for the Kolbe families and those contemplating undertaking the course in whatever format. Let's talk about the course itself, how it blends rigorous content with flexibility for our families. Megan, would you start us off in that?
Sure. So, we have Leslie Spencer here, who's already teaching our live online physics class. And she was very gracious this year to let us maybe overstuff that class with some students, because we did not have an asynchronous or digital homeschool course that we could really offer as an alternative for our students. But the good news is she won't have to do that again next year. We are currently working on releasing an asynchronous version of both honors physics and physics, and as well as a digital homeschool version of those courses. Currently, we had kind of a mini physics course available in digital homeschool that just had the labs in there, just labs integrated for students to use and go through. But now it'll be a full course with, that uses the textbook, has assignments, has weekly checks and lectures and all that sort of thing. We've continued to offer the traditional homeschool version as well. That hasn't gone anywhere. But often our families, especially with upper level science and math, are looking for a little bit more support with some of those auto-graded assignments or teacher support, either in asynchronous or full boat in the live online experience. So I'm really excited that we're going to have those physics courses across all of our formats now. It's very exciting. So, but I'm going to call out Stephen here, because he is the one that is in the thick of actually developing some of those lectures and getting to actually say all of the physics terms into the microphone. So why don't you tell us how that's going, Stephen?
I love it. We've got like you said, the traditional homeschool course. If they can get through it, or they've got a parent who's really helping them to walk through it, perfect. They don't need to listen to my voice at all. Then they can just speed through with their conversation. But I'm just kind of the guest lecturer so breaking down some of the asynchronous and the digital homeschool. So obviously you're going through the text, but presenting some of these things in short little, video, mostly like PowerPoint with audio sort of presentations, so that you can get a different take, a different summary, a different view of these things, a little bit of extra material, which, again, if you're flying through, just skip through that one or whatever. But I think the idea is that they're going to provide some extra clarity that can be layered on to all of, as you were saying, like async, somebody doing the grading or any of the self-graded assignments or whatever. I do have to say that staring at my computer while as anybody who has done these lectures, I'm not the first one to do it, but staring at your computer with no students there or no other people to see whether this is landing or not has been a challenge. But we're planning it not to be like this. You click and you listen to an hour-long lecture, though, but just little bite-sized things, so that if it's helpful, great. You can listen to it. You can listen to it again if you want. But also that kind of goes along with the fickleness of textbook producers, who, when they come out with a new edition in a year and they've shuffled everything, we have to try to do it so that we don't have to re-record a whole year's worth of lectures, but can rather put that, so it has to be more topic based than let me walk you through your textbook sort of thing. So there's been a lot of work that, by the time I was even brought into it, it's like, whoa, okay, I'm going to be doing 150 lectures. Okay, we can do that, or something like that. But broken down into topic size pieces. So I think this is going to be a great resource for people to really do the physics if they can't get into the live online course, or it doesn't work with their schedule, or they need to take more time, or whatever it happens to be. It's going to be great, I think.
Yeah, I'm really excited about offering that format. And one other thing that will be new this year for the 26-27 school year is that our digital homeschool courses will be available a la carte for purchase for our families who are in the full-time flex or part-time enrollment models. As of right now, we had only made those digital homeschool courses available to our full-time standard and full-time online families, mainly because they were in kind of a beta mode. But now we feel like they're really going to be in good shape, and we're ready to offer those a little more widespread. So you can opt into that digital homeschool physics course instead of the traditional homeschool one, even if you are a full-time flex student. So that's very exciting.
I think that part-time, well, you just mentioned part-time, and some of that's available. So, I mean, like if you've got a student who's not part of Kolbe Academy, even, what a great opportunity to get this high quality physics course, even as a one-off. Say you're going to the local Catholic school, they meet your needs, but they don't have enough students for a physics course. Boom. You can pick it up through Kolbe now, which is a great resource to have out there.
Yeah, and that's actually something that happens fairly regularly with some of the schools that we work with. It's the physics teacher is always one of the more difficult ones to find. That and probably Spanish seem to be the top two that schools often ask us for. So I'm really excited we're finally able to say, yes, we have physics now in async and digital homeschool. So wonderful.
Quite a team working on it. It's very impressive. Any final thoughts or takeaways on this topic of physics or anything we've covered today?
I think my final thought is very much like my initial thought, which is that I would encourage anyone who is homeschooling their children, to take a physics class. And if you're not homeschooling all the time, but you're not satisfied with that, consider this, because we really are building off a 500-year, really longer than that, probably a 1,000-year-old tradition. And while students might be a bit put off by some of the math, it's such an amazing thing to be able to explain to them the world around them, or for them to be able to discover the world around them, from why trees don't fall on them to why there are these odd places around their neighborhood with giant transformers. What's that doing to bring electricity into? I mean, they've been born into the contemporary world, take it for granted, and don't really understand how it works. And I think it's eye-opening when they do get it, when they do see it, when they actually see some of the electric stuff around town and realize, oh, that's what Mrs. Spencer was talking about. That's our neighborhood transformer, and that's the bigger one. And then somewhere there's a big power plant making all that electricity for us, and that's how it works. And that same electricity is the thing that makes you not fall through the floor, which, again, you take for granted, right? I mean, if you were walking on water, you'd say, hey, that's really cool. But the idea that you don't fall through the floor when it's all full of holes, really, when you look at it really up close, that too is kind of amazing. So I would encourage everybody to consider taking some physics, it will make it will broaden your soul. Which is good for you. It's good for society. It's how you love God and your neighbor. So that's my pitch for it.
Well, I mean, she took the words right out of my mouth. And take physics. It's like a beautiful language in some sense, like the language of God. And just being able to understand how all of those pieces and parts work together in our world is fascinating and exciting. So I'd highly encourage our students to do it. And hey, you might be able to get some diploma awards along the way. So check out the St. Maximilian Kolbe Award. Wants you to take physics. Go for it.
All right, we'll have a link to where folks can find out more about the awards. We also have an episode on astronomy, Kolbe's astronomy course, and kind of the history and development of that. So we'll be sure to link that. Stephen, any other episodes come to mind?
Brett Sockel
Yeah.
and Daniel Keebler, some of these ideas of the different types of knowledge and understanding we have and how they integrate together. And like, so even talking about how like all of the it used to be all of these physicists were we had all these atheist physicists who kept trying to disprove things. They were trying to address a different question than what physics is addressing, and they've largely, from everything I've read, gone away. You know, their influences disappeared. Much more, we're seeing the beauty of physics is, of course, as we know it would, confirming it's not answering those questions, but it can walk side by side with St. Thomas Aquinas and all of these other things. It's not one question that's being asked, and it's important to kind of go through that even as a student, to think, what sort of thing did I learn in my theology class? Is that the same thing that I learned in my physics class? How is it different? So just the types of ways that we know and the types of knowledge we have is interesting to consider. But we cover that a bit in those other episodes, so that's fine.
So check our show notes as usual for all the links to things that came up today. It's lovely to get to see you two ladies. Thanks again for coming back to visit with us, and we'll look forward to having you back again soon.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.